So we have to start with a little Majjhima Nikaya here, right from the texts themselves. By entrusting yourself to the awakened mind, you will be swiftly liberated, even if you have made appalling errors. Oh, it's a good place to start. Even if you've made appalling errors. So that's why we're here. So kind of recognize that. Okay, so now that we're over that, a lesson. Before freedom speaks, you must know. Know you lost something. Someone, somewhere, somehow. When a small shiver, vibration, some tingling that causes your fingertips to stretch out beyond time. Some place where that budding awareness leaves the foul taste and smell behind. Some place where that budding awareness leaves that foul taste and smell behind. So a lucid calmness, like stepping through the clouds, being held in all directions, your own strong arms, embracing that seer, that seeker, the one who promised freedom. Your own body covered in rags, a patchwork of so many dreams, caught in the destiny of becoming. Today you looked under the covers, far beneath the alluring senses. Somewhere where a warm heart and fierce eyes, feet free to walk among the high mountains again, unmoved by the chill of last year's dying. Needing only a moment of full attention, the whole world disappears. Needing only a moment of full attention, the whole world disappears. All the grasping to belong, gone. All the constructions, useless. This body-mind, interconditionality, known. Wisdom well earned sees the natural state of things. This body-mind. Now I don't know this word, interconditionality, I made it up. But it sounds really great. Interconditionality. Known. Wisdom well earned sees the natural state of things. So tonight, I thought I would give what's a really classic talk on factors of awakening. But in doing that earlier, I had to start with this story because I was a killer today, and I murdered a tick. And it was a kind of a big deal, for the tick. For the tick, yeah, but it was necessary because it was necessary. And but I was thinking about all the kind of those little things like those necessaries, And sometimes, it was like my mind then went to Lyme's disease and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
How the mind goes. No, shoot. Well, no, that's what the mind does. And then I started going back, and then I was thinking about, I was thinking about. But it took me all the way back to like the first retreat. I'd been with the Tibetans for several years, and I've been with actually a picture of Lama Yeshe back there, my kind of heart teacher my first year, and he was just a love bug, He had funny little expressions like, whenever you saw you said, "Oh, thank you so much," You kind of went, I didn't do anything. And then he'd go along, and he was just always kind of doing these little smiley grin things, and then he would go and say, "Oh, you were my mother in your last life," And he was just the ultimate kind of sweetheart, And then I lived with his teacher, Kala Rinpoche, and he was like, he looked like E.T., out of some space thing, And his fingers, and he would sit up on this little dais, and there were about 8 of us that were in his little monastery there, Westerners, And I was there quite a while, and I remember going to him. I said, this stuff's just, I'm just too thick. I don't get this stuff, it's just way too complicated for my kind of mind. Dyslexic, ADD, whatever, And so I said I wanted to go to a Vipassana retreat. So I was like a novice monk, And so I had to ask permission. This sounds crazy, but to stay under the roof of a Theravada monastery, according to the Samaya vows, I couldn't stay over 7 nights. So I had to request to stay over 7 nights to do the retreat. So I went, so I asked, And I went and I went to a little retreat with Anagarika Manindra in Bodh Gaya, India. And I met this I was in this tea shop, and I'd been a Hindu monk before that too. And so, I was a seeker, hippies, go to India, overland, whatever. And but I was in this tea shop, and this really tall kind of Westerner walked in, and we sat down, and we sat there for 2 hours. And his name's Joseph Goldstein, and he was one of the first Westerners I met who, he was young, who had an understanding in a way I hadn't come across many people. And I went and met with his teacher, and sat my first kind of practice retreat. And I went, this stuff is just like, you do what? Boring. No flash, nothing. It was just plain Jane, kind of dead in the water. And I thought, oh man, I don't know. I was too young. I needed, a little flash and flare and stuff, But I stayed, And then I went to my first. This was my first retreat, and it was really a big retreat, 30 people, And there was Joseph, myself. There was Ram Dass, Daniel Goldman, all these, Westminster kind of now they weren't then, but they were just other, wayfarers. But during that retreat, that went on I stayed 6 weeks, and at the end of it, I think I went to Rajgir for like a week or something, and came back, and Ram Dass was going to take this bus across India with all these nutcases, And I got invited to sit with the nutcases. So I sat with Danny Goldman up front, and Ram Dass had these a deck of tarot cards, and so he went around and labeled us all, what we were in the tarot. And I was the fool. And I wore a skirt in those days, and I had my purse, and I remember seeing a picture of me in what was it, years ago in Tricycle, and I kind of had this stubby hair, and there were all these like everybody looked like bush heads, you know. There was just like, you know, it's a lot of hair. I don't know why I'm telling you this, but the thing about this practice, you know, it's really not, in some ways it's really not flashy, and it's so simple that it's almost deceptive, you know, because it's all based on the fact that the practice itself is nothing but really letting go. You know, that's the whole thing. You know, and all you have to do is sit quiet enough and realize that, you know, that you are concocting, as I said the first night, you know, you're just concocting all these worlds, you know. And it's not that they're good or bad, you know. It's like the Buddha, you know, he would go to these explanations of somebody who would ask him, you know, is there a self? And then they ask him, well, is there not a self? And he wouldn't answer, you know. He basically said, no, if I answer it, then you'll think it isn't, then it's nihilistic. And then if I say it is, then you're going to make something out of it. So he just didn't answer. And that's the kind of the thing this course is about. And really, if there's any fundamentals here in your own mind, don't answer it. You know? You simply really have to just sit and wait. You know, it's the heart of all this. Is this capacity to, you know, maybe it's something about patience and endurance and just listening. But the fundamentals are based on a truth that this is about a equanimity or balance that is constantly being worked with. You know. And when I was thinking earlier about this little poor creature, I was thinking about and then Lyme disease, and I was thinking, oh my God, you know, I've been through hepatitis A, B, you know, dengue fever, typhoid. You know, the only thing I know of is malaria. I missed, you know. So I'm going back to try it again. You know. So it's really sweet being in a place like this where, you know, the elements, the food, the weather has been perfect, you know. And I was thinking, and a couple of years ago when I was in Bodh Gaya sitting this 10-day retreat, and I sat another month afterwards. I was there sitting about 6 weeks. And I sat over in this corner, the hall of the Thai temple. And it's hard to explain. I bought this white, very thin kind of shawl that I put over my head. And then I would sit there and there would be hundreds of mosquitoes. I mean, I was over in the corner, so there was actually many more there. You know. And they didn't bite me. You know. But I would sit there and they would buzz and they would try to get all your attention by buzzing your ear, you know. And so there was this incredible, you know, you would think impossible situation, you know. Same kind of mind, you know. You sit here and you get real quiet. Same stuff, you know. It doesn't, in some ways, the environment, it doesn't matter so much, unfortunately, you know. But it's nicer to be in these nice circumstances, by the way. And nice weather, where you're not just, you know, maybe sweating a little bit, you know. it's kind of perfect in so many ways. And yet, at the same time, it's still the play of these forces. And the play of the forces is all based on kind of what is the balancing factor here, is mindfulness. It is the center, it is the fulcrum, it is the kind of, I always see it in my mind, is this, teeter-totter. And that there is the triangle that is supporting the teeter-totter is the mindfulness itself. And the mindfulness is fundamentally, just to talk about it, is in some ways you have to look at how things happen. And the way things happen is, and this is one description I heard, is like there's a speedboat going along, and there's this huge wake. And that wake is our awareness. And we're way, way back, in this particular mathematics that was given that in any moment 11 million senses are hitting, objects are hitting our senses. 11 million. And we only have the ability to process 2,000 of them. Okay? Now, that tells you kind of everything right there. So we're way behind the 8 ball, And our job here is we're just trying to get a little closer. So we get a little closer to where the water and the boat, our life is touching, So we're always back. So mindfulness from that view is just remembering. It's just remembering. So it's actually memory of what already happened. And so there's this thing of trying to move up the wake of it. That's all that's happening, So be nice to yourself. This is really big time. And so we move a little bit up the wake, and we get really quiet, and we get a little closer. And so the mind itself is the mindfulness is momentary memory. It doesn't have anything, a crane in water looking down who's going to grab a fish. It's the same kind of awareness. It's just fully present. So it's not all that happens, though, because due to the mind full, or close as it can get, even though it's kind of in a sense remembering its fullness, that it also has an intelligence. And they use the word sampapajana, which is sati is mindfulness and sampapajana is clear comprehension. So suddenly there is the clear comprehension of what's happening. So there's an intelligence that's built into the mindfulness itself, even though the mindfulness itself is just a momentary memory of here, and it's way behind the 8 ball, and it can only encompass a very little of what actually happened, actually very small percentage of what's happening. So that should be humbling right there, that's the way I see it. Kind of like, oh wow, And at that point, this sampapajana has this intelligence, this clear comprehension, that simply recognizes, first of all, that it has direction, it has purpose, And that purpose has to do with an internal knowing. It's kind of like I think of it sometimes as like on a sailing boat. You can take the rudder and you can hold it and you fold degrees. There's also automatic rudders, right? So what it is the boat is never going in a straight line. what it's doing is always correcting itself. Always correcting itself. And so inside we have this, when the mindfulness is there is an automatic reading that's going on, because it's never, the last moment isn't ever the same as the moment before. It's always actually different. And so there is this constant, and it has to come from the trusting of that compass. You know, but it knows its way. It knows where you're going. You know, and that's really this whole basis of freedom and awakening. That it's not something that you think up. It's something that's fundamental, that's built in to the in a sense, the consciousness or the organism. You know. And because of that, we think we have to concoct things, or make things up. But from the Sampapajana, it says that if that compass is there and working, and you are being mindful, then there is a adaptability or suitability. So the ship can get knocked way over on its side, you know, and almost tip over. But it knows to come back, and it knows where it's going. And so there's this suitability or adaptability. And this, what I'm talking here about, is kind of trusting in your instinctual nature for freedom. And that you have to listen deeply to connect with that. That's what we're doing here, is connecting to that kind of piece. And then we have to trust that it's working. And that it also has the ability to, because there's just moments that it has the ability to remember to be mindful again. So it actually, the clear comprehension has also its ability to re-engage, kind of with the compass, you know. And that in that also is the fourth of these pieces of the Sampapajana, is that it has clear comprehension. The translation is of reality. And reality, from this point of view of the compass and the ship and the direction and the mindfulness, has to do with two fundamental aspects here. One aspect has to do with the way we think, and that so much of our thinking in our concocting and making up is based on words. You know, so we're going around naming and labeling things, which is already distorting the actual experience. Right. So the process there is that through the mindfulness in this clear comprehension, we began to break things down below the thinking mind, you know, below the labeling and naming, and to an experiential level that deconstructs what it's looking at. So there's actually a deconstruction process going on. That is, you know, it's no longer a chair. It's, you know, there's two states. There's the back. There's does that make it a chair? You know, what the chair is a concept, and the pieces of it, you know, don't make up a chair. They themselves are something else. And then you can take and break those down. That's the deconstruction process. Down to what? Is it something? You know, and at this point, in kind of Buddhist thought, we use a word, and the word is empty, sunyata. It means that it doesn't have a core. You know, so it's coreless or substancelessness. Again, a word I just made up, but it frees us. It frees us from the objects themselves. It's really cool. And it's built into the mindfulness. It's part of the clarity that happens. And at the same time, you can't just stop there and say, well, you know, it's all empty, and so, what's the point? What's all this about? Anything. So that's only half of the equation. The other half of the equation is that in this moment, in the relative reality, I'm a John, I'm a neurotic, I have all this crazy history, and that's also so. And so this is actually very real. Also, only in a moment, because that's mindfulness recognizes it's only a moment of reality. And so that reality of emptiness and things just as they are, are both there. So this is kind of the construct of the mindfulness, that it has this capacity just for moment to moment and this phenomenal intelligence. And what is the intelligence based on? If you took this triangle and you had the first part is just mindfulness, and then there's kind of the clear comprehension, the mental understanding, the construct that's built into it. What is holding it up? How does it, in a sense, kind of stay afloat? And that is based on trust. That what we're learning here is to trust in the mindfulness, and that there is an intelligence that's operating that's brilliant. It's actually brilliant. It's pretty cool. It means if we get out of our own way and we really are who we are, we're brilliant. That's pretty nice, huh? When we have such small understanding because of our belief that there's something called perfection. And we can never reach that, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about when we're whole, what's there? What's actually there? That's pretty powerful. It says a lot about freedom and human nature. And you could say, Trungpa translated basic goodness or Buddha nature. That it in that trust holds all things. We are that. Now, you have this triangle which is really held by this mindfulness and clarity, and then this trust. And then there's the balancing act. And the balancing act are known as the factors of awakening. In the tradition, there are 37, but I can't remember them all. So to keep them really simple, really there are just two factors that work here. One is an arousing factor, and the other is a stabilizing factor. And those are the two pieces working on the seesaw, trying to get it balanced out here. And on one side, there is the arousing factors. And tradition, the simplest of the aroused factors first is just the fact that there is this we have to have this quality of curiosity, of inquisitiveness, that is an arousing factor. So the first of these factors is the fact that exists. And I see in the Western tradition, and people that come to these practices a lot, have a lot of this. It's part of what takes you away from, say, your own cultural religion and history in some ways, to seek out something actually quite foreign in this tradition. You know. And we need a certain amount of that, because that's the thing that can, when we're kind of in the soup, can lift us up. So there has to be this kind of inquisitiveness there, this inquiry that has to happen. And but we have to be careful, because again, like all of these things, this thing can teeter-totter and go way the hell up, you know. And I run into people who they have such they have this arousing factor so strong that it actually becomes where they can't. They're just looking. They're questioning everything so much that they actually are just anxious. You know, it's actually kind of a neurotic anxiousness about, I can't really settle in on things. I keep, you know, I want to know. And, you know, it can happen, you know. But it's still one of our great, also, gifts, you know, that we have to keep cultivating. And it is really, this particular aspect is based on the mind. Because it's that inquires and that questions and wants to know. The second of the arousing factors is defined as energy, which has to do with the body. And again, I think sometimes, when the first years of my practice, or many years of my practice, I was with a teacher who we didn't walk. So you'd sit, sometimes you'd sit for 2.5, in Asia we actually sat 2.5 hours, you know. But what I found was that it could go along okay, but there'd be days where I just, you know, it was no energy to kind of stick with what I was supposed to be doing. Sometimes I did. But I found this practice of trying to find some balance through sitting and walking. And, you know, and when there's a lot of, you know, you can say kind of sickness or you know, sloth, torpor, sleepiness, fogginess, that actually going out and walking really fast, you know, can be very helpful in the sense that it brings energy into the body. The same way with Qigong or Tai Chi or Hatha Yoga of different kinds that are actually based on bringing physical energy, you know. And so a lot of times in this practice we don't emphasize it so much, but the walking is to balance that out. So it can be helpful. But I also find that sometimes say, for instance, and I like to run, but running sometimes, if too much of it, then it brings energy up too high, and again, it is kind of an anxious, you know, it's like it races the mind in some way. So again, you have to find just the right amount. And I don't know, for each of us it's somewhat different, you know, and you have to experiment with that. Of finding out how this is all about this teeter-totter. And each of us are different, you know. And some will need more of one or the other. And you will always have to be, in a sense, trying to work with these factors. Okay? They are essential to do this work. So that's really, in the sense of the arousing factor of the body. The third factor of the arousing is sometimes referred to joy, rapture, delight. And it has to do with the heart. And a lot of times, when you get too somber in this, it can be a very serious kind of thing. And that's why I think humor is a basic, fundamental truth here. If it's all empty, what's the big deal? Come on, give me a break, And, really, we made it all up. Okay. So I think that the humor is great, But the whole thing is, how do you lighten the heart? And lightening the heart now this is just from an energetic point of view. And so I think love does that. Just thinking about someone you love or thinking about love itself, it can actually bring, when you're just kind of sludgy and you're kind of caught up, or a person who has a pet and they think about how what is it? They don't talk back? Something like that, But there's a thing about touching in to the kind of innocence or uncomplicatedness that brings delight and joy, and therefore brings energy and can actually bring our practice up. Again, too much of it, and we lose mindfulness. We get kind of lost in it, and then we kind of, the boat keeps lifting off. So these are the kind of the three of the arousing factors. We spend quite a bit of time here. These you have to work with each in your own ways, because we spend more time in the stabilizing factors as far as this practice goes. And that has to do first with tranquility, which has to do with the body. And that has to do with stillness of body. So we come here and we sit down, we shut up, we try to, become a pretzel and find some tranquility. It is fundamental to the practice itself that the body then finds a stillness, and that stillness then supports the mindfulness. It's an important thing. Of course, too much tranquility, we just kind of go off. So that's, anyway, I'm just going to go through these and so we have tranquility, which is really that of the body. Then the next one is known as concentration. And it is the collecting factor, and it's also a thing we work specifically on here. So I'd say if any, the two most important ones we actually, in these kind of retreats, we work on, is tranquility and concentration. Now, concentration is something of the mind, and it is really that ability to, again, it's a stabilizing factor. So it means that in some ways there has to be, again, enough energy or effort to, it's like counting the breath, or, I breathe in a long breath, I breathe out a long breath, I breathe in a short breath, I know I'm breathing out, a short breath. It's the fact that we're tracking. So there's a tracking system going on. And that tracking system, whether it's the mindfulness of breath, or it could be metta, and we need a certain degree, and actually, and I don't emphasize it so much, but can be a very high degree of concentration, as is tranquility, that is really helpful for insight. It is a fund that you read over and over again. It's a fundamental basis for it. And again, it is possible, and there are many different kind of schools and techniques of this, in the sense of actually taking it into what they call the absorptions or jhanas. And they are really high degrees of concentration that help encourage one in the practice itself, because it again, from one piece of it is really about the degree of for you to recognize that there are finer sensual planes than the one you know, okay, and that there are also states which are, and those are sensual planes that are not sensual, that are really mind planes, that give a degree of expansion of mind. Kind of cool. So again, and people can get lost in that, but they are available and they're supportive. And that's the concentration. Then the next of these is, and that's of the mind, is that of the heart, which is the stabilizing factor. And that is equanimity. And sometimes this is taught, there's two ways this is taught. One of them, it's taught in order, from the kind of inquiry and investigation through to equanimity. So it's a progress. And I like this method of where the mindfulness is kind of the pivotal or center point, and these are supporting actors of your practice, so that you can begin to recognize, well, if there's I'm too much this, then I know I can balance it with this, of arousing factors or stabilizing factors. And equanimity is the even-mindedness, but the even-mindedness that's really about open-heartedness, So it actually, when it sees suffering, it doesn't recoil. It actually allows more space around the suffering. So it's not pulling away from it, and it's not getting lost, it's not getting into the drama of it. It actually just sits in the center and holds it. It's really, I think so many times of Mother Teresa and her, her incredible capacity to have love in physically difficult circumstances. I was thinking about the Kali Temple in Calcutta there's this block, and the block is owned by the city, and the Kali Temple, which is one of the most famous Kali temples in all of India, is there with this big black stone in it, and people, just lines of pilgrims come, and sometimes it's so moving to watch these pilgrims who, they're coming to get rid of the dark force in their father. And I remember seeing these women prostrating themselves from their village. They had done full prostrations in their saris, to come and rid their father of the darkness. And they were going to ask Kali to take the darkness from him. Incredible. And also at the same time, that's the heartfulness you see there. And you also go in there, and they have black and white goats, little baby goats. They bring hundreds of them, and they cut the throats there, and the blood goes out over the grounds, and then flies. And there are a bazillion flies to come. The most, what's this? And yet, here is where Mother Teresa is on the back side of that, with this hospice of, for the destitute and dying, home for destitute and dying. Remarkable, equanimity. It means that the heart is not lost in the flies, or I remember going in and being nauseated by the blood of all these little baby goats, and the kind of the seems so violent and I don't know, really creepy kind of, But there's this thing about in India, I don't know, something about here we fear the dark, and so the dark shows up in wars in Afghanistan or wherever. It shows up, and there they actually allow it to be contacted and felt. And I think there's something about sometimes we hide from it, whether we put makeup on dead people, and I don't know. My grandfather was an undertaker, so and he used to make masks. I when I was a little teeny kid and I lived in El Salvador, and we would come up, and they lived in a 4-story house that had an elevator, and it was really cool. I mean, it was like, oh wow, incredible kind of mansion, But it was also a church, and had caskets and cold rooms where they had all these dead bodies and stuff. And then he worked with accidents, car accidents and stuff. And he would remake the faces, because that's America. They wanted everybody to look like what they used to look like. So he would, and they would make clay masks. And I would be up on the 4th floor in this little room, this little teeny room up on the top floor there. And across the room from me was the room where all the masks were kept. And I'd go and look in there, and it was like, the 2 sets, one that damaged, and then the from the picture rebuilt, and then rebuilding it in wax and stuff. And wow, we get into it. Isn't it simpler? Just it's like in Tibet when I was in Mount Kailash. I went up to the place where and seeing all the kind of bones and stuff, where they chop the air burial, or they just chop it up, throw the bones out there, and the vultures come and they eat them. I thought that was pretty cool. So we do the hidden worms here, but I don't know where I'm going. Equanimity. And it is it's somehow an ability to keep the heart open in difficult circumstances. And I know last year there's a whole piece around hospitals, and it's so invasive. That whole world is it's like they take your controls away from you, and you just kind of have to be this, cattle being prodded or something, and also security. So, just human beings. I'm just going to stop here. This is from Ajahn Sumedho. Awareness is your refuge. Awareness of the changingness of feelings, of attitudes, of moods, of material change and emotional change. Stay with that, because it is a refuge that is indestructible. It is not something that changes. It is a refuge you can trust in. The refuge is not something that you create. It is not a creation. It is not an ideal. It's very practical and very simple, but easily overlooked and not noticed. When you're mindful, you're beginning to notice. It's like this. It's like this. That's all. like this. So, sit for a moment. It's like this. A lesson. Before freedom speaks, you must know. Know you lost something. Someone, somewhere, somehow. When a small shiver, vibration, some tingling that causes your fingertips to stretch out beyond time. Someplace where that budding awareness leaves the foul taste and smell behind. Somewhere where that budding awareness leaves the foul taste and smell behind. So a lucid calmness, like stepping through the clouds, being held in all directions, your own strong arms, embracing that seer, that seeker, the one who promised freedom. Your own body covered in rags, a patchwork of so many dreams, caught in the destiny of becoming. Today you looked under the covers, far beneath the alluring senses, somewhere where a warm heart and fierce eyes, feet free to walk, among the high mountains again, unmoved by the chill of last year's dying, needing only a moment of full attention, needing only a moment of full attention. The whole world disappears. All the grasping to belong, gone. All the constructions, useless. This body-mind interconditionality, known. This body-mind interconditionality, known. Wisdom, well earned, sees the natural state of things. Wisdom, well earned, sees the natural state of things.